Hi, listeners. Welcome to Grief Out Loud. Remember the last time you tried to talk about grief and suddenly everybody left the room? Grief Out Loud is opening up this often avoided conversation because grief is hard enough without having to go through it alone. We bring you a mix of personal stories, tips for supporting children, teens, and yourself, and interviews with professionals in the grief world. Platitude and cliche-free, we promise. Grief Out Loud is hosted by me, Jana DeCristofaro, and produced by Dougie Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. On the show, I've talked with a lot of people who felt wholly unprepared for the reality of grief. Many of them were caught off guard by how physical their grief felt. Others were shocked by grief's ongoing nature. And some were surprised by how grief affected almost every aspect of their lives. The unexpected part of grief that doesn't get talked about as much is when people find themselves still able to function, able to get out of bed, pay bills, do dishes, go to work, even remember to send their friends birthday cards. And for some, they go beyond functioning. They're still able to laugh and have fun and make future plans. For Yona, the contrast between the intensity of her heartbreak and her continued ability to get up every day and engage with life was super confusing. Yona's mom, Anita, died in March of 2021, a few days after Yona's 26th birthday. Anita died of a pulmonary embolism that happened just hours after coming out of surgery. Yona was devastated and still able to function. So if you've ever caught yourself wondering, what is wrong with me? How am I able to fold laundry right now? How was I able to get through that meeting at work? This episode is for you. And it's also for anyone else out there listening. Yona and I talk about her mom, their relationship, what it's been like to grieve as a young adult when so many of her friends haven't experienced a grief like hers, and how her grief has changed over time. Just a quick note, listeners, this episode mentions feeling hopeless and overwhelmed by pain. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255, or you can text HELLO to 741-741. Okay, here's the episode. Yona, thank you so much for being part of Grief Out Loud and for coming on a call with me all the way from Finland. I really appreciate you making time for this.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about your mom, Anita. When you first reached out to me, you described your mom as your best friend and basically your whole family. So tell us a little bit about her and what does that mean to you that she was your whole family?
Well, I mean, she wasn't my whole family, but she really felt like that because when I was 13, my parents got divorced. It was a difficult divorce. They didn't really talk to each other after that. So even though I have a relationship with my father, and I think it's a really good relationship, she was the pillar parent or the primary parent. And, we were just so similar. Watching her was like a time machine for me, I was like, okay, in 30 years, I'm going to be like her. We had really similar personalities. And, for me, she was just the definition of my family. I also have a big brother who, we're in touch and we're good, but we're different. And, we didn't really spend time together and we still don't. My mom was like the family member who I just really, really, when I was with her, I felt like I'm with family.
Like she was really your person.
Absolutely. And she was just, for me, I think she was just my whole connection to the rest of our, our extended family and everything. All those relationships to other people as well, like my cousins and, her cousins and everything. She was like the link between us. So it's been, hard navigating that, now I have to stay in touch with them myself.
Yeah, and I've heard other people talk about sometimes the person who died was kind of like the sun in the solar system. And then when that person dies, all the other planets are like, where's the gravity? Like we don't know how to orbit each other in the same way without our primary connection to the sun that made the entire system stay together. There was something you mentioned that really caught my attention. You said that being with your mom was like watching a time machine. You were like, well, that's what's going to happen to me in 30 years. And just wondering, were there certain aspects of the way your mom was or her personality that you were excited to grow into? And on the opposite, were there things that you were like, ooh, I actually kind of hope I don't embody that as I grow older?
Definitely, there were both. I think, she was a really warm and kind and wise person. And she was really curious about everything. Like my cousin used to tell me, or she actually told me after she died, that, it was so special about your mom that, another person would walk into the room and be like, oh, you look nice. And my mom was always like, oh my God, that dress is so beautiful. Where did you get it? She was always just so excited about everything. And I think that's something I really want to embody. She was a lot more optimistic and positive about life than I think I am. As a person and professionally and as a boss and everything, she was just a really, really good person and people wanted to be around her. She was so compassionate, which made her a really good boss. And, she was such a dedicated. I really wish that, I grow into that kind of person and especially the kind of mother she was. I think she was not just a really good mom to me and my brother, but she was also like, she made an effort to get to know all our friends and partners. And, I think our home when we were teenagers was kind of like the place where everybody hung out because she was cool with it. She was like, it doesn't matter if it's a bit messy. I'd much rather have like an open door policy and, have everybody want to be here and get to know everyone. And I really hope I become that kind of mom. Then there's always a downside to being a really, really compassionate person. And I think for my mom, she really dedicated her life to others, which is such an admirable thing. But I just think she didn't really take care of herself always, and she didn't put herself first ever. I've always looked at that trait in her and been like, I don't want to do that, and I want to put myself first, or I don't know first, but at least value myself and take care of myself. And I think that's something that I've been really conscious of always.
Yeah, almost as if you want to make sure that you continue to care for yourself the way that your mom cared for you. That she prioritized your well-being and you want to be able to prioritize your well-being as well. And, your mom died so suddenly and unexpectedly from a pulmonary embolism after, a successful surgery. I'm wondering, how has the suddenness of her death affected you?
I think everything's been delayed because of it. Like my reactions have been delayed. So when I first heard, there was like a week or two that I really didn't feel anything. I was completely numb and I was really frustrated with it. And I had this, I call this, crisis hotline or whatever, which is, for people who lose their loved ones. And I said, like, why am I not crying? Or, why am I was sleeping perfectly fine, like 9 hours a night. And I did not understand what was going on. And so they told me that, this is your body's protecting you. This is too much. You have to wait for, the reaction to come bit by bit. It's not going to come like a tsunami all at once. I think everything's been delayed. And, not just my grief, but also like practical arrangements, like everything was like, no one thought she would die. She was not prepared to die. She had her, documents all over the place. And all the practical arrangements were really difficult because there was absolutely no preparation from anyone. I'm only now starting to actually access my grief after a 5-month period of just getting all the practical things done and trying to just make sense of it. And I think for me, this has also been very difficult for, my sense of safety. I have had this feeling, and I still do, like, can anything happen? Could I die right now? I was worried, of course. I know surgeries are always a risk, but I was still thinking, like, it's probably going to be fine, right? And so then I got the call that it was fine. And 24 hours later, I got a call that she was dead. I could not believe that something so unlikely could happen.
So your whole sense of like how the world operates and the things that you hold to be true, which is you get through the surgery, everything's fine, so you're going to continue to be fine. All of that got upended and called into question.
Yes. And I'm not really a spiritual person, or I'm not religious in any way. So I had this moment of like, how can this happen to me? How could this happen to me? Who decided that this person should die? And who decided that I and my brother and, everyone who was close to my mom needed to suffer this loss? And so I had weeks of really like existential crisis. I was like, how can this be my life? Like, I can't believe this is my life. And I really needed answers. And this time has gone by, I've realized like I'm not going to get answers, and I am not necessarily even a believer in that there's a reason for things to happen. I just feel like bad stuff happens, and it's really random who it happens to.
Yeah, well, that's a process to get there, right? At the beginning, it's like, who is to blame? Like, who can I say, this is your fault that this happened because it should not have happened. It's totally not fair. It doesn't fit with the way that the world is supposed to work. And it's not just that this happened. And so, you reached out to me probably 2 months ago. So that was about 3 months after your mom had died. And you reached out to say like, I'm functioning, I'm decorating my apartment. I'm not leveled by this grief the way I expected to be. But it sounds like today, 2 months after that, your experience of grief has really shifted. And I wonder what you would say to the you of 3 months ago, standing where you are now, 5 months since your mom died. Like, what would you want that part of you to know?
Well, first of all, I just felt when my mom died and the weeks and months, like the very first weeks and months, I was really scared. I was so scared that it was just gonna all come at once and I was gonna crumble under it. And I was also scared that, I think everyone says this, like, I'm never gonna be happy again. How am I gonna ever, build a life that I'm happy with without her? At the same time, I was not in touch with those feelings. So I was like, well, I'm fine. I'm, just doing stuff that I usually do, but I'm really, really scared this is gonna affect me later. So what I would want to say to myself is it's going to affect you, but your body is protecting you. It's not gonna come all at once. It's not gonna make you so sad that you can't get out of bed ever again, or you can't sleep ever again, or you can't go to work, or you can't eat, or you can't laugh. Because for me, my notion of grief was, especially at this age, like my mom was 54 and I had just 3 days earlier turned 26 when she died. And so I thought, if my mom would die, I would die. Like literally, I would die. I thought I could not survive that. And I think when I did, or when I am surviving, it just doesn't feel like enough. So nothing, no grief, no amount of grief is really enough. You feel like you've lost like a limb or something. It's not what I thought it would be. And I'm just coping way better than I would have ever expected still. But I am learning to accept that this is grief. I was wrong about grief, at least for me. And this is what it's, this is what it's going to be.
What is grief looking like for you recently? Like, how is it showing up in your body and your mind and your heart?
In the beginning, people reached out a lot. So someone was calling me every day or texting me, and I could, I just had this pool of people who I could call, and I talked about this all day, like all day. I didn't do anything else than call different people and talked about, my mom being dead. And now I'm noticing, you know, that people are moving on and they have their own lives, and they're kind of forgetting that this process is still very raw or actually just getting started for me. Um, so I'm noticing a bit more like anger or irritability or frustration with people close to me, for what they're saying or not saying, and I'm feeling a little bit more alone. But I am feeling much more confident in my grief and much more. Um, I trust that this is. I'm going to make it through this process, and it's going to feel better. I am going to feel better. I'm sure about it. I'm sure of that. I feel like in the beginning I was so worried about not making it, and now I feel like, um, we were designed to survive grief, right? Because everyone grieves and everyone loses people. I've been having a bit more physical symptoms lately, tightness in the chest, difficulty breathing, which is scary when her cause of death was pulmonary embolism. So I've been also really convinced that I'm having a pulmonary embolism when I'm having trouble breathing, because basically a pulmonary embolism is a blood clot in the lungs. I've had, moments when I'm like, okay, I'm having a pulmonary embolism now, and then I've, called a doctor or whatever, and they had to tell me like, no, you're grieving. This is anxiety. This is, a manifestation of your grief. So always when there's something new coming up, like a new symptom or a new, thought or perspective, it's really unsettling at first, and then you kind of accept it, like, okay, this is grieving also. Now I'm feeling this way.
It seems like one of the hardest things for so many people when they are grieving is to make space for whatever feelings are coming up, whether they're physical or emotional or thoughts that we're having. And that so much time and energy goes into trying to make whatever's happened stop happening. And that creating that room, there's less struggle in that, even though there's still the reality of how it's manifesting and the discomfort of that. But there's not the additional, like, blaming yourself or shaming yourself for however it is showing up. And I know you mentioned earlier that, you're like, whew, I was totally wrong about what grief looks like until it happened to me. I wonder what, if anything, you learned about grief from your mom, either from things that she shared or from just watching her deal with grief, if she experienced it as you were growing up.
I thought about this question because my mom had lost both her parents, and I didn't really have, I mean, I had a relationship with them, but I didn't really grieve them. I don't think I can call it grief compared to what I'm going through now. So I was thinking about, like, did we talk about her grief for her parents? And, I realized that when my grandpa died, it was like 4 months before my parents separated. And I think for her, the grief of the divorce and the grief of her dad were really mixed together. And I didn't really know which was which. And I don't even know if it matters which was which, because it's grief, right? She's grieving both things. But life was so hectic and chaotic at that moment that she was really, really trying to hold it all together. My brother was acting up. He was 15, the worst possible age for this stuff to happen, right? And so he was very difficult. And she was just trying to, maintain normalcy somehow. And I think if she grieved, she didn't grieve in front of us at that moment. I mean, I'm sure she grieved, but I don't think she wanted to show us. And then when my grandma died, she only died like 4 or 3 years ago. I just think, she was 82 and she had cancer, just a very undramatic way to go somehow. Like we just all felt like this is the circle of life. 82-year-old people die, and sad, but it's not tragic in the same way as it is when a 54-year-old person dies. My mom's grief for her mother was more like, I don't know, melancholy. And she said, like, she told me that because they had a difficult relationship, which was, in the end, as it often goes, my mom was more like a caretaker for my grandma and took care of her financial things and stuff like that. So she told me that I feel like I've forgiven my mom. That chapter's over. And I think for her, that was grief when her mother died. I really don't feel like it's applicable to this situation because this was unnatural. A person that age just shouldn't die. And, it was sudden and I am so young. And so I don't have tools that my mom has given me directly. However, I think the kind of person she was and the compassion she had for people just really gave me tools to be compassionate with myself and also listen to people's experiences and help myself. I don't know how to explain it, but I think I am coping really well under these circumstances. And I think it's because, the person I became, the person she raised me to be.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the idea that your mom loved you so well that you're able to love yourself well through this experience. And that in a way she continues to care for you even when she's no longer here physically. It also made me think about the care that you're receiving from other people. And you mentioned that at the beginning, you were calling people every day, just needing to talk about it all the time. And now things are starting to shift in terms of your circle of support. And like at this point, 5 months later, and where you are now in your grief, what are you most needing and wanting from friends and family and other people who are in support roles for you?
Right now, the most important thing is just to remember to ask me once in a while, like, how are you doing with your grief today? Because it's really hard to bring up. You don't want to be like a bummer, right? you don't want to when you're having dinner and you're having a nice conversation, and you don't want to be the one who says like, so should we talk about my dead mom now? I really appreciate it when other people give me like the opportunity to talk about it. And my friends, luckily, are really good at that. So I am extremely lucky, I think, with my circle of friends. I mean, it's a small circle, but you don't need like 50 people to talk about it with. You just need a few people who really you feel really loved and supported by, asking me how I'm doing and continuing to ask me, because the thing that we all got wrong before anyone, started grieving was that we thought that grief was a linear process. It's like, okay, so in the beginning you feel very, very bad. And then, day by day, it gets easier. And so I thought maybe a year from now, I'm going to feel like myself again. And I have had to obviously abandon this whole belief because that's not the way it works, and it's not going to work like that. And I can't believe we thought it works like that. It's really important that people understand that for me, this process is going to be ongoing for the rest of my life. It's never going to be inappropriate to ask me how I'm doing with my grief, not even in 20 years, I think. It's going to look different for sure, and I'm probably going to be at a completely different place, but it's still going to be relevant. I think we have this built-in need to comfort each other. So when I'm talking about my grief and saying, sometimes it's pretty dark, right? Sometimes I've been like, especially in the beginning, I was like, and I want to say I'm not suicidal at all, and I would never hurt myself in any way. But I like genuinely was thinking like, if this gets too hard, I can always kill myself. My friends got super, super upset when I said stuff like this. And when I tell them about how raw it is. And they're trying to comfort me, and they're saying things like, your mom would really want you to do everything you've always dreamed of and not change, your plans or the course of your life because of this. And it's just, I think words that are meant to comfort me are hurtful, because at the same time, it just makes it so abundantly clear that they don't understand that the world has changed. So I can't live the life I planned to live, because, that included her. And I have to make adjustments because she's not going to be around.
Yeah, I want to just take a moment and really acknowledge what you shared of it's, it seemed to me like it's speaking to how overwhelming it felt and how scary it was to be in that much pain. And like, how am I going to tolerate this over the long period of time? And that often what people need is someone who isn't going to be scared of that with them, to be like, I hear you. I'm I'm here with you in that. What do you most need right now?
And I think that's really hard for people, because, and I don't think with my friends necessarily it was even them getting scared or overwhelmed by what I was saying. They just desperately wanted me to feel better. They couldn't stand to see me so sad. So they thought that, they could say something that would make me feel better about my mom being dead. But the thing about grieving is that there's really nothing, especially people who have not grieved anything, can say that's going to make you feel better. And it's better to listen and ask questions and be curious and accept whatever answer I'm giving without trying to make it easier or a little less dramatic. I mean, for example, I have a really good friend who his attitude towards this is like, there's already one life ruined, right? My mom's life is over. He doesn't want me to, quote unquote, waste my life. And I totally understand where he's coming from. I understand that I have a long, hopefully, life left to live, and that I have to find ways to be happy and to really live to the fullest. But grieving is not wasting your life, right? Grieving is a part of life, and grieving sometimes means you're going to put certain things on hold, or you're going to do some things completely differently than you would have done them if that person were alive. They really missed who I was before this happened, right? And they're trying to convince themselves that I'm going to be that person again. And maybe I will in many ways, but also I won't be that person again because something life-changing happened.
This is a weird analogy, but I was imagining like you go to the grocery store, you get all the ingredients for a particular recipe that you're planning to make, and you bring it all home and you start to cook it. And then one of the main ingredients like falls on the ground. It's no longer available. You can't use it. Like say you're baking bread and like the flour falls on the ground. You have no more flour. You can't just move forward and make bread without flour. You have to reconfigure the recipe or make something different. And so as you're talking about, like, there's no way I can just put my life plan in place with no changes because a major ingredient in that life plan is no longer here.
That's a perfect analogy, really, because that's what it is. Like, for example, we were talking about getting married, and me and my friends and our partners, they were just like, I think you should just do the wedding you've always dreamed of. Like your mother would want you to have the dream wedding. And then I was just like trying to explain that it's no longer my dream wedding because I envisioned it thinking that both my parents are going to be there and alive and well, and now they're not. So it just doesn't seem fun anymore. I want to do it differently. For other people, this is obviously, they think it's tragic, but it's not life-changing for anyone else than me and my brother. And of course, our partners who are very close to us and close to our mom. But for everyone else, it's kind of hard to understand that why would I make such major adjustments just because one thing isn't the way I thought it was going to be. It's just that one thing is so major.
So, Yana, in this period of time, 5 months since your mom died, you talked about how grief is showing up. You've talked about what would feel good from friends and family. What's currently helping you in your day to day?
For me, I've had a lot of feelings about, or a lot of feelings of like anger, and I've taken it out on my friends and the ones that are closest to me lately, which has been very difficult because then I not only live with grief, but I also live with guilt for treating people like crap. And I think for me now, really important has been talking a lot with my friends. And while I'm not angry, reassuring them that this is not about them, this is about me. And, being validated by them and saying, it's okay, we understand. I'm going to filter what you say to me. Setting boundaries to certain people, not, for example, attending big groups of young people have been a bit of a trigger for me. I feel very alone and isolated and griefy in those situations. Just taking really good care of myself, I think, exercising, trying to eat good food, limiting alcohol, that's been a major thing for me. It doesn't help me whatsoever, and it actually makes stuff a lot worse. And just being around people that I'm comfortable with. I've spent a lot of time with my mom's friends, and that's been amazing because I felt really close to her. And, those are people who knew her and they tell me stories and they never get sick of talking about her. I don't know. I've been reading a lot of books. I actually read the book, The After Grief by Hope Edelman. I think I heard of it in this podcast, actually. It's too soon for me to read that book, but it's really helped me because actually there was this one page who brought up this term dosing, which basically explained why people are able to function even after major loss. And it's somehow apparently our minds have this built-in ability to dose the grief. So you engage in grief activities, you mourn, you look at pictures, you cry, you're sad, you're angry, and then you do other stuff instead, and the grief kind of rests. And for me, that was a big aha moment. Like, okay, so this is why I haven't been consumed by my grief every second. Like, this is why I can just look at TikTok or whatever for a couple hours and laugh at silly videos. Or this is why I can focus at work. I couldn't in the beginning, but I'm starting to now. I felt really guilty about my grief not being intense enough. But I've, slowly realized and accepted that grief, let's just say grief is normal. I think, we all experience grief. And that book for me was, I don't know, this promise of that it's going to get better. Like, because I really needed, I was so scared when my mom died. And when I listened to podcasts and stuff about grieving, what they focused on was, the fact that grief is forever and you never stop grieving. And while that's true, I think it's important to say you will feel better. There will be moments when your grief is not the biggest emotion in the room. It's going to take time, and I'm not there yet, but I truly believe it's going to happen. And I really think people need to hear it in the beginning when they're grieving. I needed to hear it.
Yeah, it's almost this idea that over time it becomes more reassuring to hear that grief lasts the rest of your life because it's still with you. And you're like, phew, okay, I'm normal. It's been 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I still carry this grief in some way with me. It's okay. But right at the beginning, it may be more reassuring to hear grief changes. it's not going to always feel the way it feels right now. It doesn't mean it's going to go away, but it's not going to feel this intense for the rest of your life in the exact same way that it feels now, because it can really have that sensation at the beginning of it's just always going to be like this, and I'm not going to be able to get out of bed for the rest of my life. So I'm grateful for you for emailing me and being like, hey, I have this other side of grief I really want to talk about and share with your listeners. So I'm grateful for you today for talking with us and sharing that perspective.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
And listeners out there, as always, I thank you each and every time for making the show mean what it does, for tuning in, for sharing episodes with people in your life that you think can be helped. If you're out there like Yana was, listening to the podcast and being like, I totally agree, or, oh, there's this thing you're not talking about, reach out to me, send me an email. My email address is griefoutloud@dougy.org. That's DOUGY.org. That's also our website, the best place to go to hear our past episodes, to learn more about our program, and to access all of our free resources. So thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us again next time.